So as I said earlier before, we have a guest minister that will bring insight, enlightenment to the naturally divine. Few questions I'm going to share with you. What is the truth behind our human nature? Even if we believe that all humans are naturally divine, what does that really mean? Can we consciously recognize this nature in others, in ourselves? I'd like to bring up our guest minister, Reverend Cynthia Paulson. She is a interfaith minister and a divine science practitioner student. So let's explore these questions. Let's explore ourselves. Let's explore our divinity together with our guest speaker, Reverend Cynthia Paulson. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Maya. I feel like Maya needs to be up on this podium someday. She is fantastic. I'm so happy to be here. I have been a guest speaker with you guys for a couple years and never in person. So it's just a real treat to be able to be here in person with you all. So thank you for having me. Thank you for tuning in online and for being here today. So the theme for this whole month, if you guys have been tuning in with Dr. Bob or coming to see him, the whole month of August has been about the wonder of nature. And Dr. Bob has talked about various things, forces of nature, the different elements of nature, and animals. Remember, he was talking about the creepy crawlies and the planet and our relationship to the planet. And today's topic uses the word nature a little differently. I'm going to talk about the wonder of our human nature, which is kind of an interesting phrase. Why is it when you hear someone say, "Oh, that's just human nature," it's almost never said in a positive way? Have you ever noticed that? You never hear that saying after something positive happens, like when someone's being compassionate or showing kindness. It's always after someone's being cruel or, really competitive or mob mentality. That's when you hear, "Oh, that's just human nature." No, it's not, right? Our human nature is that we are naturally divine, full of the goodness of spirit. That's what we're made of. That is what's true. It is like when Dr. Bob tells us often at the beginning of the service, I'm sure you've heard him say before, "Such is the nature of life and the nature of spirit, that all it asks and all it wants is the opportunity to show up." You are that opportunity, and so am I, and so it is. We hear this almost every week, this reminder, and we nod our heads in agreement. Yes, I am an expression of the divine. That is my nature. Yes, I am the opportunity to show up as spirit. What does that really mean? When I was thinking about this, I had this ridiculous thought, as if we have all been invited to the costume party of life. And we're all showing up in our various costumes, just like we would at Halloween, right? I'm showing up as a vampire. I'm coming as a witch. I'm going to show up as spirit. What would you even wear if you were going to show up as spirit? You wouldn't have to wear anything special at all, I suppose. You could just come as you are because you're an expression of spirit naturally, simply because you exist. You are naturally divine. Okay, so carrying this metaphor a bit further, How would people know who you are at this costume party of life? If you aren't dressed in any outwardly visible costume, people would have to recognize you by your behavior and your nature. And that can prove to be a bit tricky and challenging. How do we know how to behave in ways that are expressing our true divine nature? I have to tell you this story. When I was in elementary school, I'm thinking it was about second grade, my class had a Halloween party. This was back when, teachers could get away with having Halloween parties. I don't even think they let you do that anymore. Of course, we were all in our costumes, and we bobbed for apples. That's showing you how old I am. And we had treats, and we had candy, and we played games. And one of the games we played went like this. The teacher would tape a piece of paper onto your back with a character written on it, and you didn't get to see what the paper said. And the class would give you clues about who your character was to get you to guess who you were. And I remember loving this game. We were having so much fun. I was a smart kid, and I just knew that I was going to know exactly who I was when it was my turn. So finally, my turn came, and the teacher put the paper on my back, and the class started giving me clues. And I was ready, and I was listening and listening. And I had never been so frustrated in all my 8 years of life. I don't remember what my classmates said exactly, but I definitely remember having no idea what they were talking about. I didn't know who the character was they were describing. Nothing they said made any sense at all. And they were frustrated too, and some of them were kind of mean and thought I was being dumb for not knowing who my character was. So finally, the class just gave up, and the teacher gave up. And she took the paper off my back and just handed it to me in this sad little game over for you move. And to this day, I will never forget what the paper said. It said Flash Gordon. I'm sure I wanted to scream out, who the heck is Flash Gordon? See, I had never heard of Flash Gordon. I had never read a comic book in my life, and in fact, I don't think I've still ever read a comic book. I had never seen the movie. I guess there was a movie out about Flash Gordon. I remember wanting to cry, and I distinctly remember wanting another turn. This wasn't fair. How could I possibly know who I was if I had never even heard of the person I was supposed to be? I had never been exposed to comic books. I had never seen the Flash Gordon movie. So I'll say it again. How could I possibly know the truth of who I was if I didn't even know anything about that character or that person? Similarly, how can we really express our divine nature if we don't spend a little time learning about this nature? You have to know what God's nature is if you're going to fully express it. What is divine nature? I have been studying this, so I'm so excited about today's topic. Last year, as Barbara mentioned, I began the Spiritual Practitioner Training Program with the Divine Science School of Metaphysical Christianity. Big, long, fancy name. But essentially, divine science, for those of you who might not know, is really one of the precursors to religious science, which we know today as Centers for Spiritual Living. In fact, Ernest Holmes was an ordained divine science minister when he did his work and wrote Science of Mind. So it's all very familiar New Thought stuff. So one of the main principles and foundations of divine science is this idea that because of our oneness with God, we naturally inherit the attributes and inherencies of God. Divine science defines these inherencies, these fixed characteristics of the divine, as wisdom, love, knowledge, understanding, power, life, and joy. They list other attributes of the divine, such as peace, health, wholeness, harmony, abundance. You know what I'm talking about. There are many more attributes of the divine. I call these words the God words. So I want you to think for a moment about what these words mean to you in your life. How are you naturally expressing these things? Wisdom, love, knowledge, understanding, power, life, joy, peace, health, harmony, wholeness, abundance. These attributes and qualities are our divine nature. They are our truth. They are the truth of our being. One of the reasons we want to pay attention to our divine nature, to these God words, and study them and meditate on them, is so we can recognize them not only in ourselves, but in others. It can be challenging to see these traits in ourselves, and it can be really challenging sometimes to see them in others. Last week, my husband and I were fortunate, and we got to travel to Nevada and have this great vacation visiting family and friends in Reno. And we had to take several flights to get there and back. And let me tell you, traveling in airports and standing in lines at security and getting on and off planes, you have many opportunities to be aware of your divine nature and to try and see this divine nature in others. At one point, we were in a long, winding security line, and we kept passing this one family as the line moves. You know, you zigzag through the lines. And it was a mom and a dad and two young boys, probably about 4 and 8 years old. And here's what we noticed immediately. The parents were whiners. In their defense, it was about 4:30 in the morning, you know, those 6 a.m. flights. But still, the dad was complaining about how he didn't get enough sleep the night before, and the hotel they had been staying at was dusty, and he was up coughing all night, and on and on. And so we moved through the line, and then we crossed their path again, and this time the mom was complaining that why do they only have one TSA checkpoint open, and they really need to open a second one. And so we moved through the line, and the next time we passed them, one of the little boys was whining, and he says to his dad, "Why do we have to stay in this line?" And the father said to him, "Stop whining. Nobody wants to hear your whining." And we were cracking up. And of course, I had today's sermon in the back of my mind, and this family made me think about how some of our human nature we learn from our parents and from our childhood experiences. Now, those boys may very well grow up to have a whining, negative, complaining nature like their parents, because that's what they're being exposed to. That's what's being modeled for them. How we're raised influences our personality, our temperament, and our nature. But when we're adults, and especially when we're spiritual seekers, like those of us here in the room and those of you watching online, we know that no matter what we think our human nature is, we always have the opportunity to become self-aware and recognize our true nature, our true divine nature, because that's what we really are. It takes conscious effort to bring this into our awareness. Ernest Holmes reminds us of this in The Science of Mind, and Maya used the same quote, "Great minds think alike." He said, "There is that within us which partakes of the nature of the divine being, and since it partakes of the nature of the divine being, we are divine. That is a big statement that can lead to one of those aha moments. I recently had an aha moment along these same lines when I read 9 little words in the Divine Science textbook, and they knocked my socks off. It said, "What is true of God is true of me." Will you say that with me out loud and proud? What is true of God is true of me. Don't you just get goosebumps when you say that? What is true of God is true of me. When I think about that and take that into prayer or meditation, it makes me want to sit up a little straighter, walk a little taller. Like maybe I have a responsibility to understand my divine nature and step into this truth of who I really am. Oddly enough, I feel like the royal family in England is an amusing little illustration of this. A few months ago, back in June, they held the Platinum Jubilee for Queen Elizabeth. God bless her. She is 96 years old, and this year she celebrated being on the throne for 70 years. And there were performances and parades and just this giant celebration. And they brought her out on her royal balcony where she sat with her royal family. But the real star of the show, if you caught any of the news stories, was 4-year-old Prince Louis, one of the Queen's great-grandsons. He is the son of Prince William and Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge. And if you saw the videos of the celebration that went viral, Prince Louis was acting up during the Jubilee. He was fussing and making faces and talking back to his mom and generally misbehaving. Now, in the videos, you couldn't hear what he and his mother were saying to each other, but they interviewed some lip readers to see if they could tell. And according to these lip readers, she was telling him, "Stop it. Watch the parade." And he was saying, "I don't want to." And she told him, "You have to." One could certainly imagine the deeper meaning she was conveying to him, the deeper meaning that is probably taught to all the royals when they are children. You know who you are. Be aware of your lineage. You are royalty. Choose to behave accordingly. Now, setting aside the whole royal bloodline illustration, you realize we can all trace our lineage directly to Spirit, our source. Keeping our true divine nature in our conscious awareness inspires us to accept our role as expressions of God and expressions of Spirit. We could consider this our job, our responsibility, our duty, but I like to think of it more as our choice, an amazing opportunity, and really our great honor. I want to wrap this up today with just part of a famous quote from Marianne Williamson, one of my favorite authors. You might have heard this before. She says, "It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us." We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. Friends, that is our divine nature. That is what we're here to recognize, understand, express, and radiate. So today is a great check-in. Check in with your divine self. Let it express, let it shine. Let's use today's service as a launching point. The call to action here is to be sure that you're making every effort to fulfill your divine potential by being consciously aware of your divine nature, of those God words, wisdom, love, knowledge, understanding, power, life, joy, peace, health, wholeness, harmony, abundance. How are you going to show up as spirit today? Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for having me.